Welcome in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because I know there's many of us joining here from around the world. I'm guessing a little bit more from European time zones. Um, I'm in Mexico, as you were already alerted to. And so, yeah, I thought, why not share nice background there. Um, it wants me to confirm in Spanish. It's funny. Oh, cancel. Okay. So, So yeah, welcome in. I'm really happy to be back here. I think it was a year ago. I offered something. So it seems like I'm on that, one of the teachers who joins you once a year. And I remember having a great time with you last year. For those of you joining again, for those of you who have never met before, you've never seen me before, it's nice to virtually meet you. I hope to have more interactions with you, of course. And overall, for me, this is how do you say it? I don't know, a great opportunity to discuss our human predicament, and not necessarily um, that in a negative way, but we do have to understand the predicament we're in to get out of it. Just like as we would go to the doctor with an issue, and then from the doctor understanding what's going on, they could provide some service, provide some way to treat what's going on. So I am just a practitioner, meditation practitioner like all of you. As pointed out in part of my bio, I've had a chance to study Buddhism somewhat, deeply. I don't know what really, in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, deeply means like being in a monastery for 30 years of study. So it's all relative what you mean by deeply. But I've been at this about 25 years, and every year it gets better in the sense, not that things feel more remedied or fixed necessarily, or necessarily, I guess I'm happier than I was 25 years ago, but I'm not really looking for that. And we'll get into what I mean by that later. What would we look for if we're not looking for sort of temporary happiness? But I will say it just, the well gets deeper of what the Dharma offers. So, I imagine probably the majority of you here would not self-identify as Buddhist, which is totally fine. And some of you might. I'm going to teach from the Buddhist tradition because that's what I know. That's what I practice. That's what I teach. But of course, I view the Buddhist traditions and lineages less as passive belief and more as passive inquiry, and giving us tools and knowledge and practices to mine and deepen our understanding of the mind, of our minds, right? And this predicament of being human. So for me, like I said, every year that well gets deeper, and I really appreciate that, and I feel really honored to be able to share in that with you here today as a community. So without further ado, let's get into some practice. So if you'd like, go ahead and find a posture that's relaxed yet alert. And basically, I think most mainly we're just keeping the back somewhat straight, relaxed, but just a posture where we won't fall asleep. The Buddha did recommend 3 postures, more or less. You can sit cross-legged on the ground. Of course, that includes being in a chair. You can stand, you can walk, or you can lie down. But most people, when they lie down, they fall asleep. So I don't recommend that unless you already know that you're not going to fall asleep lying down. Generally, we sit up. And just for a moment, before we get into our practice, just tuning into the body, tuning into your mood. Already we're using mindful awareness to just start to notice what's arising. And of course, the more you can do that in a non-judgmental way, just noticing, okay, I'm a little sleepy, or I'm a little cranky, or I'm really pissed off what just happened before this session, whatever's going on for you, it's not bad, right? We're going to use those experiences in meditation. This whole topic about our struggles being the path, just to introduce a bit of it, it's all about using life in meditation, not about meditation being separate from life. And so we're already starting that just by acknowledging, hey, I don't I don't feel that good right now, or I'm sick, or I'm tired, or I feel great. I feel really energized and ready for this session. So whatever it is, whether you feel it's good or bad, just acknowledge what's happening. And from that acknowledgement, see if you can even accept it. Acceptance doesn't mean you have to like it. It's just an acceptance. This is happening, right? Just take a moment to do that with yourself, your moods, emotions, your body. You don't have to like it, just accepting it exists, it's happening. Now, I'm sure we have a wide range of meditators here, some who are maybe newer, some who have been meditating a long time. So wherever you're at, just try to relate as best you can. And the first idea, we're already going to start introducing this theme of our struggles or the path. The intention here is not to meditate to soothe away from life. It's to meditate to encounter and hold life in compassion. So what that usually means to me, again, is I'm growing this tool of mindful awareness to meet my current experience. And of course, if you need to settle in order to do that, you do that. But we don't settle to bypass. Okay? So that's what I want to recommend. We're not settling to bypass. We're settling to provide a healthy ground to meet with compassion. So if you'd like to, you can start to orient to the breath, if that's a tool you normally use. If you'd like to try something a little different, you can meditate with what I'm going to do, which is simply feeling the feet as the feet. Feeling the feet flat on the ground if you're sitting in the chair, or if you're sitting cross-legged, just feeling the parts of the body that are connected to the ground below you, the knees, legs. You can combine the breath into this if you like, just breathing into the feet and legs, breathing out, letting yourself settle into the feet and legs. And settle just means be. Doesn't mean no thoughts, okay? Just means be with the feeling of the feet, the leg, the breath. With each inhalation, you connect deeper to your experience, the sensation of the feet touching the ground or the legs touching the ground. With each exhalation, just allow yourself to relax and rest into the feet and legs. So this is our chance to ground, chance to just allow the body to settle, which in turn helps the mind to settle. And when we settle, we can start to see more clearly into mind, into this human life, into this experience we're having this day together. So the purpose in Buddha Dharma is always compassion. There's always this sense of meeting life as it is, opening up the heart. Even the practice of settling the mind is aimed at that. Now, when it comes to settling the body and mind, we can't force, we can't will. More, it's a practice of being with breath, being with body, with sensation. as best you can. It's not about perfect concentration. It's about redirecting attention and awareness back to the body and breath as needed in a kind way. There's a sense of gentleness, kindness in that. If there's nowhere to get, there's nowhere to push. So let go of getting anywhere. Let go of getting anything, including calmness. Who cares about calmness? Not that interesting, actually, at the end of the day. Now, for those of you who are newer to meditation, you can just stay with this practice for the majority of the time, if you'd like. But for those of you with a little more experience, I'm going to start to notice the aware quality of mind. Some people call this mindfulness. I prefer to call it the aware quality of mind. Just this sense of watchfulness, knowing you know you're with the breath, you know you're with the body. So without coming out of the breath and body, start to abide in that quality of awareness. Abide just means be with awareness equally, 50% with breath and body, 50% with awareness or watchfulness. Not a sensation. It's not a concept. It's an aspect of the mind that just knows. So without disturbing a sense of groundedness, having connected with breath and body, connect with awareness. Just be with that. There's nowhere to get. Allow yourself to be content with whatever level of focus or attention you can bring today. And of course, when you notice yourself distracted in a string of thinking, you just come back to body breath awareness. We're just adding layers of practice. We're not shifting or changing the practice. I'm just introducing new aspects you can become aware of. And as I said, if you're newer to meditation, you could just simply stick with body breath. It's your choice. So this next layer is not blocking. Awareness itself can't be obstructed. It doesn't actually change. Of course, our experience of it changes. That is impermanent. Awareness itself has a type of pervasion. So why do we need to construct an artificial meditation practice around it, in the sense that we're blocking what we see, what we hear, what we smell, taste, touch, even what kinds of mental states arise, emotions, thoughts. So just one by one, if you're newer to this kind of layer of practice, see if you can allow different parts of your experience to exist. Just simply exist. But actually, awareness isn't obstructed by sound. It's not obstructed by smell, taste, touch, sight. So if you tend to meditate with your eyes open, if you really want to try something new, as you can tell, I don't have my eyes closed. That does take some practice if you're not used to it. So just do whatever feels more comfortable. There's actually no need to block sight. There's no need to close the eyes. There's no need to block smell, taste, touch. Actually, there's no need to block thoughts. Thoughts aren't really the problem. But come back to this awareness. Come back to this sense of knowing and watchfulness. Make sure you're being with that, right? And the practice here is just simply to be with awareness. Allow the continuation or continuity of just connecting to that, being with that in an open way. You need to come back to body and breath. Go ahead and do that anytime. Of course, we're going to lose awareness, normal for all of us. Just recognize you lost it. And when you recognize it's lost, you're actually back in it. You don't really have to do anything else. Just be with it again. We'll go back to my premise in the beginning of our practice. If we shift the purpose from finding a state in meditation or a certain way of feeling to cultivating awareness that has the capacity to host our experience, meditation is simply about being with awareness. It's not about what you're feeling, how you're feeling, whether it feels good or bad. As long as awareness is present, we're meditating. See what that looks like to you to emphasize that for the next 7 or 8 minutes. And I'm just going to leave more silence to do that. I know this might be quite new for some of you. What do you have to lose? 8 minutes. Go for it. Just try to play with it a little bit. In our last minute of practice here, just letting things be completely open. What this means is we don't create meditation as something abnormal. Open your eyes. You can start to move the body or look around, but see if you can stay with knowing and awareness. I know that's not easy. As soon as we open our eyes or look around or we start to move the body, it reminds us of this habit to be distracted. See if you can stay with just a very light awareness. This is what I usually call kind of the bridge into post-meditation. Because if we only know how to be aware on the meditation cushion, it's actually not that useful. It needs to be used in our life, right? We need to connect with awareness in our daily life. Otherwise, it's really difficult to bring struggles into the path. So this is a good time to just let go of whatever you got hung up on. The practice went well, great. If it didn't go well, great. Just take some joy that you spent some time today on your meditation practice, that you actually took the time to join in. Just rejoice in that. Mudita is a very powerful state of mind. Really can counter the negativity bias that is just so prevalent nowadays. It's actually quite useless. Doesn't help us or others at all. Doesn't mean we can't acknowledge what's wrong. Just means rejoice in what's right. That you showed up, you put in your effort. If you'd like, you can dedicate the energy of this to the benefit of all beings. I read a wonderful quote recently. Everybody wants to change the world. Nobody wants to change themselves. It's true, no? We're here actually trying to change ourselves in order to meet the world. Not as a savior, just as a sane person, right? So, I don't know. I think that's a wonderful aspiration. We don't have to be someone special, but if we transform ourselves, naturally we're going to benefit others. It's obvious. Okay. So thanks so much, everyone. As usual, if you kind of have questions from that practice, I know I might have introduced some things that are newer to some of you, especially if you practice in the Theravada tradition, though there are some correlates in the Thai forest tradition to what I just did. But either way, go ahead and jot down, a question or a little note to yourself if you need. And in about 30 minutes, I'll open it up to Q&A, and practiced questions are totally welcome. Also questions based on the short little dharma talk I'm going to give. So our struggles are the path. When I was thinking of topics for this, I was just thinking, what's really alive for me right now? And pretty much this is my main practice, how to take, quote unquote, my problems or what I perceive as problems, how to take them into my path of practice. To start off, I thought it actually, we need to talk a little bit about what do I mean by path? What does path even mean here, right? Because again, it's totally fine. We have kind of our own individual path, or I don't know, how do you say it? Like we have our own kind of like, okay, I have my spiritual approach and it's a combination of many different things. More power to you. Do what you need. As I said in the beginning, for me, I kind of, I don't mistrust human beings, because often we can see like when something's repeated a lot over time, and a lot of human beings say, hey, this kind of works. Let's just think of medicine as an example. Like traditional medicine, I imagine like traditional Chinese medicine, we have traditional Tibetan medicine, Ayurveda, etc. Those have existed for more, some of those Ayurveda for more than 5,000 years, 6,000 years. It's evolved over that time, but a lot of things were just corroborated by different human beings trying things and saying, okay, there's this illness, there's this disease. When we apply these herbs in this protocol, it cures it, right? And so that we kind of confirm each other over generations. So I don't think there's a huge need to mistrust, um, I guess, human beings trying things subjectively. And that's how I kind of think of Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma is not a singular thing. We have many lineages of Buddha Dharma. Those lineages change as they meet new cultures. But the fundamentals of what works doesn't change, because if that changes, then actually that tends to not exist anymore. Because enough human beings try it and they say, oh, well, this doesn't lead to freedom, so we're going to abandon this. But the lineages that have sustained, the Buddhist lineages that still exist, they still work. And they've been time tested for 2,600 years. I call it, 2,600 years of R&D, or research and development. So from my perspective, I trust that a little bit more. And mostly I trust it by trying it in my own body and mind, right? Like that's when we really confirm something. It's not about a conceptual belief here, right? This is where I come from, because I like to say this, because sometimes we get caught up in like, oh, I need to 100% understand this before I can trust it. We're not going to 100% understand Buddhism. It's a vast subject. Just even the three characteristics I'm going to describe in a moment are just vast. So we have to start practicing and trying things, and things start to shift and transform us, and it gives us some trust to keep going, right? Just like we would with a doctor, where a doctor says, okay, you got this such and such illness, let's try this medication. You try the medication, you see a little bit of a change or a difference in your illness, and you trust the doctor to keep going. I don't know what else we have as human beings, really. What else do we have? We have to, like, what I mean? It's like at a certain point, we have to just try things. This is kind of how we are. Can't know 100%. So, anyways, so that's kind of my preamble. I don't believe in blind faith, but at a certain point, we do need to just kind of trust a little bit and try some things in our life and see if they work. I'm sure all of you have a sense of that. So what is the path? Right? Because all of this preamble, I really just want to talk about that there is a path, and a path to do something specifically, right? I guess you could say in the Buddhisms, there's many paths, but they all kind of work with remedying certain things. And there's many ways to talk about that. Some of you study Buddhism, you're going to recognize some of the things I say. There's also other ways to talk about it. But I love that about Buddha Dharma. There's so many ways to get at it. But I find the three marks, or what we call the four seals in Tibetan Buddhism, I find them to be such a good kind of barometer for understanding the human predicament and understanding the mind and how we bind ourselves into dukkha, or dissatisfaction. And so basically, these three characteristics are ways to understand how to stop going against a stream or a river, right? So I imagine myself a lot of the time when I'm struggling, when I'm going through a problem or issue, even if that's just, I'm hungry, right? Like, we don't think of that as a problem, but it kind of is, because it's something that we need to cook, we need to solve, we need to get some food, or whatever. So it doesn't have to be the biggest problems we're talking about today, like, how to solve climate change. We don't have to go there necessarily. Just the little things in your day, when you get a little bit cranky, or you didn't sleep enough, or you're arguing with someone close to you, right? These little things that cause us to have tension, to contract. I think these things are also worth our focus in working with the three characteristics in the path of Dharma, because they're happening all the time throughout our day. It doesn't always have to be this focus on the bigger issues, though it also can be, right? It can be both. So for me, when I'm really struggling, like I said, it feels like I'm going against something, like I'm going against some kind of a river that's flowing, or a stream, or a strong rapids or current. And over the years, I've grown to see this as sort of basically going against the three characteristics. And what are these three characteristics? A lot of you know these. They are anicca, or impermanence, right? Dukkha, or dissatisfaction, or suffering, though I'm going to reframe that in a moment. And then anatta, or in the Tibetan tradition, we talk about shunyata, or emptiness, right? Or all things are devoid of inherent existence. So we have impermanence, we have dukkha, or one of my teachers frames it as nothing is perfect. I like that framing of dukkha. Nothing is perfect. And then the third of all things are devoid of true existence, or all things are devoid of inherent existence. That includes self and phenomena, right? And that's the bigger dive in Buddha Dharma. But either way, we frame it like that sometimes. And so when I'm struggling, when I'm not bringing my struggles and my problems into the path, or even seeing them as the path, what I notice first is usually I'm mistaking something that is impermanent for being permanent, right? And this is, I like starting here because it's not such a big lift for a lot of us. And what does this mean? It means that something is in the nature of change. It's inevitably changing and shifting and all that, but we're not letting it change. And again, this isn't always a conscious thing. This isn't like, I'm a conscious idea. I'm not going to let this change. It's underneath. It's in a habit. It's in a feeling. It's in the way, I'll tense up or contract upon something I don't like, right? Like something I'm struggling with, even if it's just being a little sleepy, right? Something like that, something small or big. So this is the first one, not fighting the current of change, right? So what I'm describing now, just to point out, is this is one way to think of path. The path is using our struggle, noticing if we're fighting change, if we're fighting impermanence, right? Basically, if we're stuck on permanence. The second one, which is probably the window or the characteristic I kind of use most, the seal or the characteristic of dukkha, or that nothing is perfect. This is the one that just gets me every time, right? This is the one that I'm sure you all can relate to, where we don't like this, We try everything we can normally to try to wiggle out of things, right? And by wiggle, I just mean fight it, resist, get frustrated. We're not able to accept, etc. Right? And this is also complex because it's not, the teaching on dukkha is not saying, if you have a certain illness that could be cured, it's not saying don't go to the doctor, right? So it's complex because then we have this sense sometimes that we can fix or change things, right? But when it comes to the mind, when it comes to identity, when it comes to how we work with our emotions, often that's when we get into trouble. Because if we can't accept that emotions themselves are imperfect, if we can't accept that relationships themselves are imperfect, we're going against the stream, as I said earlier, right? So when we take our struggles into the path, it's the path of working with this understanding. Again, I'm not saying you have to believe this. It's something we reflect on. It's something we study, right? It's something we practice. And as I was introducing the practice of awareness, all this becomes stronger, and we're able to work with more of this because we can host more of it in awareness. We can see more clearly how the emotion, how the habit of fighting dukkha is working, how we're resisting dukkha, how we're unable to accept what's happening. And then, of course, the big one, shunyata, right? Which I'm not going to get into a ton because I don't necessarily know your background that much. If you want to ask, you're welcome in the Q&A, so we'll find out. Shunyata is the big one, right? Because shunyata is basically the teaching that we are fighting a reality that doesn't exist in the way it appears. So in a sense, we are basing our whole belief system, our sense of self, our sense of other, our sense of the world on something that is kind of like an illusion. It's not non-existent, right? An illusion doesn't mean something is non-existent. We can't say a bird didn't just fly there, right? We saw it, right? Or I just saw it, right? So a bird just flew there. But at the same time, where? Right? And so because things are interdependent, because things lean on each other, because things are in relation to each other, they're not findable ultimately, right? And so this is a big topic. It's not easy to understand. But the point is, when we go against that, we automatically return to dukkha. We automatically return to subtle experiences of resisting reality, because that's essentially what we're talking about. How do we not resist reality? So that's kind of a bigger idea of what path means. Now to kind of make it a little more succinct and relatable. To me, I basically think of the Buddhist path as learning to swim with the stream of compassion and wisdom, or compassion and non-dual wisdom, right? So another term, what it describes shunyata is non-dual wisdom. So this stream, so the path is the stream we enter of non-dual compassion and wisdom, right? And we can see this matters because non-dual compassion and wisdom are the practices, are the ways we work with abiding in those spaces, abiding in an open heart that's willing to be with dukkha, abiding in an open heart that wants to see reality as it is, that doesn't want to, make something permanent that's impermanent, that doesn't want to make something exist in only one way, that actually exists in multiple ways, right? And can be seen in many different ways. So this is why path matters, because path gets us to encounter, and it gives us kind of a laboratory or a workspace to work with our struggles, essentially, right? So just to recap, I'm framing our struggles as a resistance of reality, as a way, maybe, a habit, we could put it that way, a habit to resist reality. And what is reality? Reality is impermanent, it's imperfect, and it's free or devoid of independent or inherent existence, right? Again, I'm not inventing this. This is, the Buddha taught this, right? So just in case you weren't sure, this isn't my invention. Anyways, so let's start with compassion, right? Because now I want to make it practical, just talking about, well, how do we meet these struggles through this path? And like I said, we can really sum up the three characteristics. How do we practice those? We practice those through practices of compassion and practices of non-dual wisdom. So we're going to focus a little more on compassion. So I define practices of compassion like this because the word karuna in Sanskrit, it has a little bit of a different connotation than Judeo-Christian tradition and traditions. It's not completely separate, but often we can sort of superimpose those ways of seeing the world, because that's what a lot of us grew up with, whether we were religious or not. It's just embedded in the culture. Not that that's bad. I personally find the symbology of the Christ image, all of that, incredibly useful, right? I'm actually going to use an image of the crown of thorns in a moment. But in Buddhism, it's slightly different, right? And so compassion, I find it takes some time to actually understand it, but to be it actually doesn't take that much time, because we are it. From the moment we're born, we seek compassion, actually. And we can see this comes out the most in moments of need, right? When we see a need, often a lot of us respond with being with that need, right? But just to refine it a little bit more, I'm going to define compassion as the practice of being with discomfort, okay? And I know this is a little challenging and controversial maybe for some of you, but sorry, this is just, I don't want to sit up here and sugarcoat things. I just want to be real. We only got 30 minutes, or we only got an hour to talk together. So compassion, for me, in the Buddhist tradition, is the practice of being with discomfort. Now, again, sometimes when we think of that, we think of like, oh man, how am I going to do that? I don't want to be with my discomfort. I came here to meditate to get away from my discomfort. This sucks. Boom, out of Zoom meeting. Please don't leave. But because I'm gonna help to kind of connect with this, right? So let's go back a little bit to what I said. Discomfort doesn't necessarily have to mean, or say practicing with discomfort doesn't mean you need to practice compassion with the most difficult thing in your life. Actually, please, 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 I beg you, do not do that, right? If you're doing that, take a step back. So that's why earlier I said, just these little kind of oohs, ahs, kind of things in our day, right? We woke up with a little bit of a shoulder or back pain, a little bit. I'm not saying something you need to go to the doctor for. We woke up a little tired when we know we got a long day. I'm just getting over a cold. You can probably hear it in my voice, having a head cold, So the things that are kind of inevitable in life, but we take for granted because they're kind of low-grade discomfort. So that's what I'm going to emphasize here. And some of you might think, well, what's the point of that? The point is to get used to the uncomfortable. I usually say one of the practices of compassion, one of the ways we can work with it is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. But again, we don't start with like our biggest heartbreak. We don't start with the biggest problem in the world right now. We don't start with all that. Just start with the small things is what I recommend. And as I started to allude to, there's something I've been exploring, which is just this idea of being with our thorns, right? So even though I said karuna or compassion in Buddhism is a little bit unique, it's not completely different than other religions, but it's a little bit unique. I find the symbology of the Christ image, especially the crucifixion image, quite helpful. And I don't mean to trigger any of you if kind of you had a rough go at Christianity early on. Some of us do. So again, this isn't to trigger you, so just forget it if it's not helpful. But the crown of thorns image, if we take it as a symbol, not as a literal thing, I find it quite helpful because it's sort of like through being with our daily thorns, meaning these little oohs, ahs, these little things that rub us the wrong way, through inviting what I mean by being with them is we're inviting a relationship into them. We're inviting them into the practice of awareness, just being with them with awareness, feeling their contents, noticing what other emotions are coming in around them, and being gentle with all of that. Meeting that with, it's not quite, it's a little bit of friendliness, but it's not quite like we're not trying to bright side something, if you know what I mean by that. We're not trying to fool ourselves into thinking, oh, this is great. No. It's not about bypassing in that kind of a way. It's just about being with, allowing, okay, this is happening. Can I be with this? Can I allow this to exist in my experience? And yet I don't have to catastrophize over it, right? And a lot of that comes down to what's been most helpful for me is somatic awareness practices, being with the emotional content or the somatic feeling around it, right? I'm not going to go into that here, but I have a lot of content on my YouTube page and website and stuff you can check out, and I can recommend other things. So anyways, so whatever practice of awareness, be that a more embodied or somatic awareness practice, be that a wider awareness practice that we how do you say it? We're working with in our daily practice, awareness can host discomfort. It can host these little thorns. Just like the crown of thorns, these thorns actually allow us to open to heartbreak. They allow us to open to the imperfection of life, of human life. And as we open more to the imperfection of human life, what's strange is our heart actually becomes more resilient. So this is kind of another thing that I usually say, another little mantra I use. The practice of compassion is to allow the heart to break open, not to break down. So this is like a good sign. If our heart is breaking down towards the world, we need to change something, right? Actually, for me, this is kind of an emergency issue. So I'm really going to implore you as meditators, please, if your heart is breaking down, if you read the news and your heart is breaking down, you need to change something. Because each of us, when the heart breaks down, actually we become less capable in helping the world, right? So instead, we need to shift the practice. We need to do something to allow the heart to break open, right? And again, there's many things we can do, but what I'm advocating here first is a practice of being with our own thorns, allowing ourselves to feel them, to not catastrophize, overthink them, but just simply to allow, things that we can work with, not your biggest things going on, right? Not your biggest struggles or problems, just small things. And what we're going to find there is actually, not only can we host imperfection, not only can we host discomfort or pain, but actually we become warmer because of it. So compassion has this warmth. Compassion has this resilience. And most importantly, it actually makes us more in tune with others. Not in tune in a way where we collapse or break down at suffering, but where we actually meet it, right? So to me, I'm not joking. This is an emergency issue. A lot of people think, okay, emergency is changing this, changing that, doing this, blah, blah, blah. To me, this is emergency time. We each need to do this work on ourselves, and the impact will be huge, right? So as I said, often we think we need to transform on the outside. We need to transform something on the outside, and sometimes we do. But actually, the real transformation happens through transforming ourselves. And we start to live in a different way, other people notice that and we can help others, right? So I'm a big advocate for that. So what I'm advocating here is this also is connected to the Buddhist path, but it's also very practical, like has a benefit immediately in the world, in my opinion. So that's the element of compassion, taking struggles onto the path, learning to essentially be with dukkha, right, is what we're talking about, to relate to imperfection, to not resist it all the time. Now, the next part, besides being with the thorns, is allowing our broken heart. So from this compassionate space, allowing the heart to break open, and then we can start to bring in the teachings of non-dual wisdom or shunyata from the Buddha. As I said, I'm not going to go too much into that here. I have lots of content on that. Buddhism is full of that. You can find lots of great teachings, courses, etc., and practices on how to work with non-dual wisdom. There's many ways to do it. But the point is, from this space of warmth, connection to ourself and others, then we start to explore how things exist, right? So in Buddhism, there is a discrepancy, and they talk about a discrepancy between how things appear and how they exist. Again, you don't have to believe me. This is something you would take into your own reflection and experience. So how things appear and how things exist. We can kind of infer pretty quickly that there is some truth to this statement of the Buddha, right? That there is a discrepancy in our human predicament between how things appear and how they exist, and this causes suffering, right? Or causes dukkha. And it's pretty straightforward. One of the examples, I mean, there's many examples, but one I find really helpful is just, in a group of people, there's going to be many different opinions about something. Not everyone agrees on the same thing. Not everyone agrees whether something is good or bad, etc. But just taking a simple thing, you can have a piece of music. Someone thinks it's absolutely the most beautiful thing they ever heard. First, another person, it's not their cup of tea, right? It's just sort of like, okay, I prefer classical to this or whatever, right? The point is, does that piece of music that someone thought was beautiful or not so great, does it exist as beautiful and or not so great? No, it exists as both, actually. So when we're confronting the teachings on non-duality in our experience, we're not confronting some kind of voidness or non-existence. We're confronting possibility, right? Because often the enemy of possibility is when we move or we fall into our habit of myopic being. And myopic being just means something appears, boom, the mind locks onto it as existing in that way. And then all kinds of emotions and opinions sort of come forth, right? And not only does this cause us suffering, but obviously a lot of people can act unskillfully towards others because of that. So this is really important to understand the difference in one's own experience through awareness practice, as I introduced today, how things appear and how they exist. So we start to make questions. As I said, this isn't about a belief system. It's about having open questions. Usually in Buddha Dharma, the first thing we work with is our relationship to emotions. And if we've already provided this very warm environment of allowing and meeting our experience and growing that, we're not going to bypass, right? Which can be a risk of emptiness meditation. We're not going to bypass something. We're going to be with it. And then on top of that warmth and allowing, doesn't mean we have to like it, but there's a warmth because the heart can break open to our human predicament. From there, we can start to see, how do things exist? Is this emotion, or is this mood or whatever's happening inside me, is this existing in a permanent and independent way? So we ask these kinds of questions in Buddhism. And these questions, they don't necessarily lead to like an answer in the dualistic sense, but they lead to a more open experience, which is the whole point. Why is it more open? Because we learn to flow with how reality is, right? So as I said, our struggles, just to wrap up a little bit, our struggles become the path through meeting them, right? This is how they become the path, through meeting them and really being interested in, how do these actually exist? How can I welcome these? How can these become a part of my, this kind of grand experiment of being a human being, right? And I will say, it's painful, but what else are we going to do with it? You're going to experience pain either way. You might as well take it into this laboratory And we find some joy in this path. We find some joy in working with the predicaments of being human, not just for ourselves, but for others. We find joy in relationship with them, right? So let's see if there's anything more I wanted to say. We have this element of seeing clearly, right? And seeing clearly in Buddha Dharma just means we see the truth. We see how things are, right? Again, I laid that out earlier as one way we talk about seeing truth is seeing things in their nature as impermanent or change, in the nature of change, seeing that everything is imperfect, and seeing that things are actually devoid of any kind of true or inherent existence, right? That the illusion, how do you say it? We eventually see illusion as illusion. But we also know how to play with that illusion. It's not that illusion doesn't mean non-existent. It just means things are flexible. They're malleable. And we can work with that flexibility. Okay? So I think I'm going to stop there. And hopefully some of this can be drawn out a little bit more in Q&A. So I just want to encourage you, ask whatever you want. But, think about your question for a second. Like, how can we kind of further dig into what I've already been talking about? And of course, if some of it's just really confusing, you're totally welcome to ask anything about that. And I'm happy to clarify. So yeah, tell me what's on your mind, what's on your heart. I'm going to drink more from my bowl of coffee here. I'm very caffeinated, so that's why I had this inspiring speech today. I don't know if, there we go. So Charles, I can see your hand. Great. Okay.
Okay. Interesting presentation. Thank you for that. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the third characteristic. First of all, how do you spell shunyata?
Well, the transliteration of the Sanskrit, usually we transliterate it as SHUNYATA.
Okay, I got it right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Little trouble really understanding that. Let's draw this to the extreme. When we die, if things do not have inherent existence, does that mean they no longer exist, or are they still there? Because if they are, then they do have inherent existence. To me, that's my belief. So if I'm wrong, I'd like to know how that is.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't get it either. This is a huge topic in Buddhism, shunyata. It's not like something let's read a paragraph on it and then I get it. It's not like that kind of a thing. Because when we're talking about non-duality, the premise here is we are already clinging to duality. That thought itself, that critical thinking, that the act of, logic even, that itself is dualistic. But what else are we going to do? We have to have some logical way to describe it. So Buddhism is full of that. Even that level of understanding the logic takes time. So I just want to point that out here. You're not going to understand it right now. You need to put some energy into that. But I'm also happy to explain a little bit more. But I just want to say that and premise that because we have to have some patience with it, is really what I'm saying. But either way, inherent existence in this sense, the way the term is used here, it means something that kind of, again, I think appearance and existence is a little bit easier to understand, where it's something that appears, right? So what we really mean by appearance and existence is when something appears, it can happen, like a movie on a screen. It can appear on a screen, but at the same time, it exists only because it's relating to many parts. So that type of existence is not refuted. So just that kind of answers the first part of your question. Because shunyata does not mean non-existence, right? So we can rule that out. It doesn't mean non-existence. But here's where it gets tricky, and this is where we need patience. It also doesn't mean existence in the way we normally think of it. And that's the deeper, kind of subtler aspect of it. So what does existence mean here? It means it only exists in the way we're conceptually thinking of it and habitually relating to it right now, right? Just like I said, a piece of music, just take that as an example, but you really could take anything as an example. A piece of music can be related to in many different ways. Why? Because it's made of many different parts. It's not a singular, permanent, independent thing. So this is some of the logical reasoning we study and we use to infer neither existence nor non-existence. And that's what shunyata is. And it's not easy to understand. I'm still working on it too.
But it is conflating the quality of something that is definitely does have an inherent existence with your perception, which may be what are those qualities? Are they good or bad? For instance, if you fall off a 50-story building, that approaching sidewalk is going to inherently kill you. It's there, and it's going to be there even after you're dead. But that piece of music, you don't sit there and judge the sidewalk. Gee, that's a good sidewalk or a bad sidewalk. It's there. It's inherently existing. But with a piece of music, you have the alternative to impose your own quality or interpretation of the quality. It's good, it's bad, I like it, I don't. So when you see the thing that troubled me was you said all things are free of inherent existence. Well, I don't see it. Not all things are. I want busy.
It doesn't, is it? Well, first of all, is it? And then I think one thing we have to bring into discussion here, this is what I say, this is a whole corpus of philosophical understanding that takes underpinnings to understand it. So we have a thing called relative and absolute truth. So maybe what you're getting stuck in a little bit is you think we're only referring to an absolute here. Actually, the relative also functions. So because the human body has certain relative things happening, there's cause and effect happening with the human body. When the human body meets a sidewalk 10 floors up, there's going to be a result or a consequence of that, most likely death or something incredibly harmful to the human body. This doesn't deny that. See, so that's not, that would be non-existence. That would be nihilism to deny that. You see what I'm saying? So like I said,
I know, because when you say all things are free of inherent existence, you're including the sidewalk. That ain't changing.
Again, the definition of inherent existence here is independent existence. That's all we're defining as inherent. Something that's independent. So a sidewalk's not independent in itself. But yet, because of cause and effect and interdependence, we can die when the human body hits it at a certain speed, right? Just to use your example. So that's not denied here.
But it is independent. If you don't jump off the building, it has nothing to do with you.
So we're going to move on, but I'm just going to encourage you. I'm going to encourage you to, if you really are interested in this and you really want to work with your belief, as well as the belief that was just, that we're talking about here of shunyata, and look more into interdependence, and you can Google it and kind of study it a little bit more and see what it's really saying.
Misunderstanding. I don't have a belief. I'm just trying to understand, and I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to get it straight in my head. So,
oh, it's all good. No, I mean, it's just like, we're not going to solve it here. There's some mechanisms of like, when you study like Nietzsche, for instance, you kind of have to understand some terms Nietzsche is talking about in order to open up a question. And we just don't have time to go into it in the depth you want.
No problem, but thank you. Your presentation was excellent. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. Take care. Anyone else? Anything on your minds?
I actually have a question, Scott.
Sure.
Just when you were talking about like that emptiness meditation, like working with the emptiness can often lead to detachment. I was curious.
Or bypassing sometimes,
Yeah. So
for the reason that just came up in that question, actually, the reason it just came up in that question, the exchange we just had, is the word emptiness actually has a different meaning than the word empty. It doesn't imply nothingness. It implies that things are actually flexible. It actually implies infinity more than anything else. But interdependence is the easiest way to understand it, because things are in relationship, they're both unfindable and kind of cause and effect still functions. Things still matter, right? So sometimes in English we think, oh, emptiness, so things don't matter. No, things actually matter more.
Yeah.
It just means it opens up the question of like, do things need to exist in the way I'm interpreting it right now? But just back to this gentleman's question, relative truth still exists, and there's still cause and effect based on that. Meaning, if I drop this, it's going to break. So it's not refuting gravity or anything like that. Yeah. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just curious about that because I feel like recently I've met quite a few people who are coming from like kind of strict Wanko school.
Yeah.
Like, when they talk about emotions, it's very different to the way like, and I have experience in my practice and, through the teachers I follow with the kind of opening up to and experiencing emotion, a fuller range of emotions, I would say, actually, even though they're not as grippy as they used to be. They're not like as sticky. But when I hear Wanko people talk about it, it feels often like, it's almost like a dissociation that's happening. And so I'm just curious about like what is happening in that training. I don't want to like pit schools against each other, whatever, but I'm just curious because it does seem to be a bit of a trend. And I'm curious what's happening, like what's being misunderstood about teaching.
Yeah. I mean, I have no comment about any kind of school of practice or, I don't know personally, like what's happening with that. But yeah, for sure. This is a really tough thing. So it's very easy to spiritually bypass, and especially I see this more as a problem of cultural translation between Eastern cultures where Buddhism started and sort of it meeting Western cultures now. Or I would say I'm starting to just call them Occidental, and sometimes how do you say it? It's sort of like I won't go there. We have very different assumptions and habit patterns, especially around materialism. And our psychology doesn't always work the same. And so I think this is where the hiccups happen because of materialism and strong views on materialism, things either kind of exist or don't exist. And that's not really what the Buddha taught. He taught those as extremes. And so some people, when they kind of go into this idea of, okay, I got to remedy suffering or remedy emotions, there's this sense of like, I need to find this space where there's nothing, where there's no pain, and that's not really what the Buddha taught, actually, when you look at the teachings, right? He taught that if we notice the trick of how emotions are, but we don't bypass them, we can liberate ourselves from their control. Yeah. Right. So it's a tricky one. I mean, we're talking your question, the gentleman before you, they're very subtle things. They're not, like I said, they're not like, oh, now it makes sense. We have to kind of struggle a lot in our practice. But yeah, for me, just to kind of get more practical now, it really helps coming through the compassion side first. Yeah. When we look at Mahayana Buddhism, that's what it does. It focuses a lot on loving kindness, compassion, meditation, bodhicitta, which is the mind of awakening. And then we move towards non-duality from there, because otherwise non-duality does run the risk of becoming quite cold and detached. But that's not what I consider non-duality, because at the end of the day, compassion and shunyata are actually the same thing in Buddhism. But it takes some time to get at that. Yeah, great question. But yeah, no comment on. I don't want to get in trouble. Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, that's all good. Anyone else, or in the chat? I don't know if there's any question. Chat. Hey, Jane, go for it.
Well, I just want to now. Something just came up that I want to comment on. But first, I want to say that was really beautiful, and it really hit home. Resonated with something that happened yesterday for me, which is really interesting. But when you were just talking about emotions, I'm a psychotherapist, and I do a lot of somatic practices in my practice. And I find that people try so hard to run away from the struggles and the emotions and suffocate them and want these quick fixes. And it's like it's computerized in them that I'm here for therapy. You got to fix me, make me better.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you need to feel those feelings, and
Exactly.
how to get in touch with that. So I just wanted to comment. I see that a lot in therapy as well. I think it's very much an American thing. We live in a microwave world, it seems. And
Yeah, I mean,
the
it's
other
just the
con-
Occidental world. It's sort of conditioned out of this way of being with life, and so
Yeah.
we're struggling with that. And that includes our interpretation of Buddhism. So then we
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
interpret Buddhism as this kind of cold thing. But actually, it's very warm. It's very relational. It's very
Yeah.
communal, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so what I wanted to just share yesterday real quick, because it really, it's kind of a way of a metaphor, not metaphor, but what happened yesterday for me describes what you were describing with all the incremental steps that occurred, which was I was learning how to knit. And I knitted when I was very young, and I'm now not young. And I was really good at it. So I thought, okay, this is going to be a breeze, right? Okay. I was taking a lesson with this woman, and my body immediately was getting constricted and tense and frustrated, all those things. And I just was like, okay, come on, Jane, feel your feet. You're not comfortable. How can you get yourself comfortable? Because no, your expectation for this is not real. It's not going to happen. And the minute I did that, it started to it was just delightful. So thank you.
Yeah.
It really resonated when you went through the whole kind of discussion about how we deal with discomfort and how these little small things all day long can cause us so much disruption in our bodies and in our emotions and our reactions because we have
Exactly.
expectations or we have all kinds of things. So thank you. It's beautiful. I
You're
want to
most
let somebody
welcome.
else ask questions. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Yeah. And just to say a short thing, the way also the small eruptions throughout our day also flavor then how we view reality. So we could see like reality is actually quite malleable. That's really what the teachings on Shunyata mean. But we take each moment as like a frame in a movie to be real instead of connected to the entire movement of something or the movie itself, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's, to me, the way in for a lot of us is the way in through dukkha, through, as I said, learning to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. But comfort doesn't mean we're comfortable. It just means we're opening the heart to that.
We're not
We're
resistant. We're not resistant. We're open to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that actually can eventually lead to wisdom.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't always have to go to this philosophical realm of inherent existence and all this. We
Right.
can go through the doorway of what we're talking about now.
Exactly. And there's a wonderful book you might enjoy because you kind of spoke about this called River Walking.
Oh, cool.
It's beautiful. And it's really written by a philosopher about noticing everything out in the environment and being very present. And it's like she takes you through these walks and you're
Yeah.
with her, noticing all these things that you might not usually notice. But it's beautiful. Thank you. Take
Thanks,
care.
my dear.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got two people on video, and then I have two chats.
Great.
Questions.
Yeah, maybe we can alternate,
Yeah.
mix it up. Hey, Liz.
Hi,
Hey there.
good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
First of all, concrete is empty because it's made of parts. If we want to be ridiculous, push into the height of ridiculousness, the absolute and the relative, they're relative. It's empty in the Buddhist theory because it is made of parts.
Yes.
I studied to be a mindfulness meditation teacher, which I will never teach because it raised all my traumas to such a height of exacerbation. I'm just crawling out from under it after 3 years. And I'm an old person and I've been in therapy for years, but studying mindfulness really was terrifically destructive. as a result of looking at all that, I'm coming through to a new place that is very positive and strong, but it was so painful. So I wouldn't want to do that to anybody else. I just feel if you're going to teach mindfulness, you should be a therapist. That's my own stance on it. I'm not going to do that. But could you talk about trauma and it's a really big topic, trauma and non-duality?
Okay. Yeah,
Put you on the spot, huh?
yeah. I mean, well, okay. I know this word trauma is a big deal now, and it's used a lot.
Yes.
Yes. Personally, because I'm not a therapist, I'm a Buddhist teacher. I prefer to use the word dukkha, which would include trauma, by the way, right? But it would include the first layer of dukkha we call just the pain of pain or the suffering of suffering, right? And yeah, I think maybe what would be more in line with kind of maybe helpful here is kind of what we were already talking about. For me, I think compassion practices and compassion, let's say support, however that looks, that's a little more effective with trauma initially because there's a risk with non-dual practices to go into nihilism or what we call eternalism in Buddhist thought. There's such a risk to go into that where we bypass it. I think for most of us, it's a little bit safer to start with compassion, but just maybe with a premise that we are doing kind of work with compassion practices for the trauma and, with ourselves, with therapists, et cetera, help. Then when it comes to non-duality, we have to see that trauma is based on, how do you say it? I'll give this an example. I'm not a therapist, so in my very little experience of studying trauma in the modern Western sense, is that you can have an episode, like the same episode, like let's say a car accident or something like that. And you can have 2 or 3 people experiencing the same episode, but having completely different relationships to it. And this is not only based on how they're viewing that specific moment and their experience of it, but all based on their history as well. And so we can see there that trauma is interdependent, that it's, as you said, it's made of parts. And therefore, at some point, we can start to look at those parts. As I said, I prefer to do that with more compassion work, right? But if we start to look at the parts, we can start to see that in a way, part of how we can unravel the beautiful story of a trauma and bring the beauty out from it is understanding it as relational, essentially, is what I'm saying, which again, for me, holds the compassion space. Another way that's quite helpful, besides that is, how do you say it? Opening up a relationship to, I don't know how to put it, like more the way trauma is held energetically. So again, I don't work specifically with trauma, but in my own experience with my own life, my own relational traumas, I've noticed very little of it is actually stuck in my brain or head. The majority of it is stuck in my body. It's almost like stuck energy. So sometimes we don't need to think our way out of it through non-duality. We need to recognize and work with the energy of trauma in the body. So that's where I think the meeting of compassion work, non-duality, because you asked, and somatic work, those 3 things work really well together. But like I said, I'm really reticent to someone who's experiencing strong traumatic effects to do anything non-dual with them. It would be more somatic and compassion work.
Which is, well, Chris Germer, who you know of, who does works with compassion, he says, before you enter the realm of mindfulness, you start with the realm of compassion. You start from compassion. And to me, that's very, very helpful and positive.
Yeah, the Buddha started, you're welcome. To me, that's the Buddhist path also. Buddha actually started with that. But again, we kind of have our own interpretations, and mindfulness becomes this huge thing. And you're correct, there are dangers to mindfulness. A lot of people don't, because if you don't have the preparation in the body to be able to open up these pathways of mind, and we don't have the support, yeah, it could go in the wrong direction. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
my dear. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll read out the question I received in the chat. So as someone who has only begun to understand my neurodivergence in middle age, I am very aware of needing to be with myself to find my path. On the one hand, I am aware that I have a lot of training in living with discomfort, as there has been a lot of that throughout my life. In fact, I didn't entirely acknowledge it was there. On the other hand, I'm needing to work with what feels very true for my very dysregulated nervous system, mental health, getting to know my body signals, etc. And the work to find my path feels like too much. I feel that I need to feel my feelings, but also they are all just way too much. I need to go near them and also find places of safety, which by conditioning is not in my body. Can you relate the points in your talk to this context?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I don't really have anything to add. It sounds like you have a good understanding because again, we have an hour and a half. There's only so much I can cover here. When we're talking about relating to discomfort, when we're inviting compassion practices into that, of course, there's a lot of nuance there, right? And so, I primarily do this work through a practice called handshake, which is from my main teacher, Sonny Rinpoche. So you can check him out and see his work on that. There's a lot of nuance to feeling feelings and applying compassion to feelings because the point is not to go in there and fix something. And so we can have our own way of, like you said, the person asking the question, coming towards it, taking a break, coming towards it, taking a break. Some of us need these kinds of nuances. So I don't know. These days, I'm just not a huge fan at all of any kind of prescriptive, technical practice where it's like, oh, just do this meditation and you're fixed. These things are highly nuanced and highly personal. This is why we have teachers in the Buddhist path. This is why we have Sangha. This is why we're patient with these things. So everything you said, whoever's asking in the chat there, sounds like you're doing a good job. It sounds like you're understanding your limitations and how to work with them. You have some tools to work with, and there's no straight line for any of us. So I think I would just say that. But I'm really happy for the question because it gave a chance to talk about nuance here. Because again, when I'm just here sharing a talk and some meditation, it's not easy to go in the nuance that I would let's say with someone one-to-one. That would be much more nuanced, right? Yeah. Maybe we could do one video if we have time, another chat.
Yeah, I think Emily, you'd like to speak in.
Sure, thank you. I really just said thank you. This was, it allowed me to connect some dots. And I think I've been studying Buddhism now for a while. And you said something very simple. You said, now welcome in the grand experiment of being a human being. And I've so often taken the path as something that's imposed that I need to practice. And it just kind of switched it and made the outside, it made it from the inside out rather than the outside in. So I really don't have to remember 1, 2, and 3. I just have to think, oh my God, what is it like to be a human being? And it's just, thank you. And it was interesting. You just said a way in through. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. You're inside, a way in through, being compassionate and seeing those different elements of what makes the human experience is actually what brings the human experience together into this thing called Buddhism, right? And maybe just a reaction. It's really not a question.
No, I appreciate it, Emily. And yeah, I think that took me some time. I mean, I've been practicing Buddhism for about 25 years, give or take. And, it was a lot the first 10 years, especially when I was a monk, of like just it's a lot of, Buddhism is just so full and there's a lot of philosophy, there's a lot of practices, etc., let alone the different perspectives we can find in different lineages. But for me as well, it's easy to mistake and get confused sort of the thing as opposed to the thing being applied to life. And I think at some point that shifted for me. And once it shifts, it's a really beautiful thing because we realize, I don't know how to say it. It's sort of like I really feel a lot of warmth and appreciation towards the Buddha as an example, the historical Buddha, because I don't feel like he's imposing any kind of belief system or faith on me. He's really just sharing, hey, here's a wealth of things you can apply to this weird ass thing we're going through. I mean, let's be honest. Human life is incredibly weird, you know?
Yeah.
It's incredibly beautiful also, but it's weird. And so like, I really feel like the Buddha's right here and he's holding my hand. And so the more I study the Dharma, it's more things to apply to the life, not more things to sort of get busy with. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you can have that recognition.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Maybe we could do one more. Thanks, everyone. These are great questions, by the way. Great.
There are none so far, so I think we can close. We're at 90 minutes.
Oh, okay. So that's it for the Q&A?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought there was another one in the chat, but there wasn't.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thanks, everyone. I really enjoy that. I feel I could go for another hour. You all have great questions. And yeah, just really appreciate you. I think the only thing I would say, yeah, just to reiterate, you know, this is freely offered, but in the Buddhist traditions, that means there's freely doesn't mean free, it means reciprocity. So we're trying to uphold this communal relationship that existed since the time of the Buddha, mostly in Asian cultures. It's a little difficult to replicate in the West, to be honest. But anyways, for this, we're trying for this specific thing, Sangha Live. And what that means is just a reciprocity that, you know, there's a support of each other. So we can each keep doing what we're doing. That's essentially what that, I mean, Dana literally means generosity, but that's what it implies, is this reciprocity. I really enjoyed it with you all. If you want to reach me, feel free to reach out to me. My website is probably the easiest way, scotttusa.com. I got a lot of freely offered content on my YouTube channel, blog, podcasts, all of that. And I'm happy to point you in a direction that you might need. I already mentioned Sodi Rinpoche. He's one of my main teachers. If you want some more somatic compassion practices, as well as he teaches full on, I guess you could say, Buddhist past stuff leading to liberation. And so yeah, that's just one recommendation. And yeah, I'm happy to chat more with you. So that's about it. Thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate you. Take care.